Good evening. This is Vegan Synergy Meditation, meeting number 3. We're a light crowd this evening, considering it's the day after Christmas. So I hope everybody out there is having a happy holiday wherever you are. And welcome to everybody that has made it here this evening. Um, the Vegan Synergy Meditation is all about accelerated collective evolution. And what that is about is at this beginning level, which we are working on, we basically get in touch with whatever it is that's challenging us, pushing our buttons. Well, you can call it a shadow or just subconscious content. I'm not attached to any way of describing it, but whatever's dark in you that's not fully lit up, because if it was, you'd have integrated and moved on to the next shadow. And um, and then we move on to the gift. And most of the times we just get into our heart and embrace our shadow into our heart, and it tends to transform and give us a little bit bigger picture of what the message is that shadow is trying to tell us in a way that can be useful to us in our lives. And at that point, all of us in sharing our gifts in the meeting tend to generally start to connect through our hearts, and we start to create a unified consciousness field that's ready to step into a place that I guess you could say we're literally stepping outside of ourselves without leaving ourselves, because we're stepping into a place of superconsciousness that's created by all of us in our agreement and our intent to create it, so that we can receive something of the grace. That's a good way of putting it, the grace of the universal life force energy, wisdom, and letting that kind of light up and encode our our neural circuitry and our genetics, and from there, depending on how much time we have, we can actually share from that space and start to look at our shadows in new ways from the position of higher consciousness, where they can sometimes take on almost comical, which is not to say we're making fun of our shadows. It's just that when you're in a space of levity and lightness, angels can fly because they take themselves lightly. When you're in that kind of a space, it's like everything is seen with just a little bit more, vim and vigor, a little bit more zeal, and a little bit more non-seriousness. So in order to kind of elucidate what I just said, I'm going to start like I always do, and I will share directly in relation to how this all came about, and then I will spend a little bit more time after that in sharing the range of what's possible with this. So tonight I'd like to share my shadow. That's probably the biggest button pusher for me, and I'm going to open it a little bigger than we usually do, and not just talk about my own individual shadow, although I'm going to share that aspect of it, but the collective shadow that most vegans have to deal with, called willful ignorance. And what that is, it happens all the time when you start to share your vegan point of view or lifestyle with another person, and then you start to get into the nitty-gritty about, well, if you're interested, there are videos of how they slaughter animals, and which gets into it, and you actually get to see just how brutal life is for animals on this planet, without a care in the world by the vast majority, that's just how they eat, and they're not going to sacrifice what they call their meat, which is another clincher for me, that how it ever became their meat when they didn't create that being in the first place. So how did it all of a sudden become their possession just because they paid for it? Interesting. But so that is my biggest challenge is, and when you start to show that, they go, oh, no, 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 I could never watch videos like that, because then I might lose my interest in meat. And I love the taste of meat. I don't want to drop that. And so in my mind, I'm going, oh, so the taste of meat is more important than an animal's life. Your little taste is more important than an animal's life. And so I'm always left, and then it leads me in times when I'm alone to overwhelming and like crushing feelings of the whole world just participating in this vast bloodbath of animal slaughterization, and every moment of every day, at all times, in all places, everywhere. And when you've seen a few videos, it's not hard to imagine that on massive scale, and it can really, it's harrowing at times to just kind of take all that in. But if you have a heart and your heart is open, you at some point, what you see in these videos is going to become what you feel in your heart, and then you really, that's when you really take veganism to heart. But it may, it's overwhelming at times, and it's crushing, and it just kind of really almost drains the life out of me, and the hope and everything. And honestly, at times I think, what's the point of saving anything? Because look what we're saving, and look what it's doing to the rest of the living beings on the planet. It's very depressing at times to step into that space and feel that. And it brings up a lot of anger and other things, and just wanting to shake people and wake them up and go, come on, look what you're doing. But basically everybody, the vast majority, is a great big wall out there, and they are like, I'm not interested in your whatever you got. You're a terrorist. Quit bothering me. You vegans are too intense. And it's so funny if you look at these videos, you go, I'm not the one who's intense here. It's the people ripping these animals apart to make money to sell to you, so you can call it your meat. Yikes. So that's a bit of a, but this is all connected with the creation of what we're doing here. But that was the big, that really changed my whole position on veganism. And I had been vegan at that time, maybe 6 years, but then it was a time to take the next step, and that's where the gift came out. That's where we got in touch. I got in touch with Courage and stuff, and Amir started connecting with activist groups and saying, let's go do some march. Let's do a march, and let's do, like we did Jamin, let's go do a disruption. Those are pretty radical, especially in this town. Yikes. But also vigils where you wait for the trucks to come by, and you give you come up and give the animals some love and they're right on their way to slaughter. And then protests and various other things to just start giving a voice to the voiceless. And I found it was really very beautiful to start meeting other vegans out there doing that kind of thing. It reminded me of my good old spiritual days when I had been with a spiritual master for when he was in his body for 10 years, and then 10 years after, carrying on something that was passed on to me, which was kind of the spiritual warrior version of martial arts that I was kind of the head of. And so for 20 years there, really connecting, I don't really connect with those kind of people anymore. They've gone off and done, that was like, at least been 10 years since all of that. So it's been, several decades since that man who I learned from has been in his body. But what I'm saying is the vegan milieu has a very natural spiritual feeling to it, because they're already walking the path of peace. They don't need to spend a decade getting all their stuff out and doing psychotherapy blended with meditation, blended with prayer and all that to make themselves feel integrated and whole, to the point where they feel healthy and clean in their bodies, and maybe hopefully had enough insight to go vegan. So I realized that with vegans, there was a world already that was already had already done half the work of what the spiritual path is about, which is loving your body and loving everybody, and doing no harm to anybody. That's really a good half of the work. The other half is just waking up. So with that, I realized after, it just kind of naturally came about that we did, I don't know, maybe 10 different events of that kind, and then somehow that chilled out because it gets too hot in Arizona to go out in the summer at our age and continue doing those things that the younger people can do. So that gave time for a little bit of just not going to activist events, but it gave me to thinking and starting to think that, what, I've got a lot of spiritual experience, and I wonder, vegans, they're going out there and doing all this activist stuff, and that's got to be tiring and taxing, and going up against authorities and getting arrested and going out on a limb. And I don't care how young you are, that's got to take a toll physically, mentally, emotionally, on all aspects, And so then along came the Climate Healers online conference with Sailesh Rao, and and I don't know which one it was, fourth or fifth presentation was Jamin, who's in the meeting tonight, and he presented, and he was talking about how to cool the planet rather, high lightning bolt speed, so that we had time to get everybody to go vegan and all that. So anyway, him and I kind of connected, and then a week later, in the town where I live, here in Mesa, Arizona, there was Silas Rao's Vegan World 2026 conference, where the most involved vegan people from all over the world would came together to try and get this vegan thing first differentiated out into all of the different aspects of what it is, and then just to start getting people behind it and start creating the movement that can turn this planet vegan and heal the climate. And it was Amir who motivated me to call. I just called out of the blue because Amir knew somebody there, or I think it was through Facebook. But anyway, somehow we connected into the event, and we asked if you were there, Jamin, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, let me go get him." And that's how all of it began, with your and my connection. And of course, as we sat down and Jamin had his pizza, I had already eaten that night. And this was after a disruption had happened because the conference just ended, and some of the really super zooming vegan activists said, let's go go do a disruption. So when I called Jamin, he said, hey, you want to do a disruption? I'm sure, like, why not? Yeah, sure. So we went and did a disruption and disturbed the heck out of people eating in a very meaty, meat-eating, and very, very proud and angry that we came in and disturbed them kind of place. What do you expect in the Wild West anyway? But anyway, it was neither here nor there. It was fine. I got a kick out of it. And so after having that quick little meeting, James went off into his world and invited me to radish.org to start listening to talks on radical collective intelligence. And then all of a sudden, the vegan collective intelligence started coming into the conversation. And then I started throwing in this term, hey, accelerated collective evolution. That sounds like something I've been doing, this radical collective intelligence, for like 2.5 decades now with small groups of people. Not electronically, not through the internet, just in person with people in little circles, and working with a kind of, I guess you could say, a radical collective intelligence applied to spiritual development. And anyway, by hook or by crook, it eventually ended up that I wanted to create, for the purpose of helping vegans and the tiring work they do, to get back in touch with their essence and their center, where they can keep getting continuously juice from the source of life, which is where the life force is in our centers. And having spent so many years working on that specifically, and having been able to access super consciousness as a result of that, certainly not my intention, and never knowing if anything like that would happen, you hear talk about great, teachers and masters and saints and stuff being able to do that, but ordinary people, well, the thing is every one of them started as an ordinary person anyway before they became one of those whatever, and they had to put in years and years and years of whatever they had to do also. So to get to the siddha, to the super consciousness state, that's kind of what this vegan synergy meditation I created is, out of Vegan World 2026, which is the platform we are using here tonight to do this meeting on. And just to give a little flavor, and just to recap real quick. So my shadow was the willful ignorance and how that impacted me. And the gift was becoming a vegan activist and starting to open that up and starting to find my courage and starting to find the kind of people I wanted to be around, because I felt good around vegans who were doing activist work. They felt very peaceful, very loving, very like naturally spiritual people. Whether they considered themselves that or not, they were doing the right thing. And then ultimately just seeing that this was a perfect space to start sharing the gifts I've received and the siddhas I guess you could say, discovered in my life. This was a perfect place to start doing it. So that is why this group was created, to help And it's also open to non-vegans too. I mean, this group is open to anybody who wants to come and partake of it. But there is going to be, there will be at times, like my story, how I came to create this this group. And so at this point, like I said, I want to share. This is kind of in lieu of, I guess you could say, the Siddha here, because we haven't really opened up Siddhas a whole lot yet. But I'm going to share my screen and show you this document, which I just created while we were talking earlier. And this says ACE skills, which is accelerated collective evolution skills. So as you guys know, and as we've done together several times, at the first step, we have the three treasures: the shadow, the gift, and the Siddha. And so with the shadow, I have stopping the world, releasing constraints, and sharing issues with sincerity, which we all do, right, with the shadow. With the gift, we enter the space of inner silence, and we do vision work with creative imagination. And I could add, while holding the shadow in our heart and loving it. So, because that's the energy we need, that power that empowers our creative imagination to envision what it is we'd like, that shadow to grow up into and be an adult gift, I guess you could say. And then the Siddha I call handling the force of intent, which intent in this case is the universal life force, energy, wisdom. And that's the thing that's moving everything, moving from the center of everybody's and every living thing's being. And I also call it help from above, and sacred geometry prayer rules, which we have done some of with elements and trigrams. And that, of course, leads into the second step, which is sacred geometry prayer wheels, where we form, depending on the number of people we have. Like tonight, it would be the 4 directions. There'd be north, south, east, and west, because there's 4 of us. And 4 naturally has directions, 5 has elements, and so on and so forth. I mean, and 3 would be positive, minus, negative, and neutral, or you could say affirming, reconciling, and receptivity. But I mean, so just to give it some examples of different ones. 7, you could use the chakras. You could also use the days of the week that are ancient code for the 7 planets that were known back in the time when they created the days of the week. So different ones. So since we mentioned sacred geometry prayer wheels, we can also, like tonight, each of us hold the intent of a different direction. So at this point, if we'll get back to that though, I'll just go through all of this, but then, and we'll set up the sacred geometry prayer wheels even before you guys start to do your shadow, gift, and Siddha. And then the third I call stacking realities, Enneagram progressions. We haven't done a whole lot of that yet, but that's basically, once you get a prayer wheel, you can learn, and we did it actually, but I didn't call it out as such when we did it the first time we did a prayer wheel, and we started going deeper into the elements and taking them into more universal aspects of themselves, and also into more infinitesimal aspects and like cellular. So that's what happens when you stack realities. You go up into like you go meta, just go up and up and up, and you can see how any aspect of a sacred geometry prayer wheel can actually become more all-inclusive and more all-encompassing in terms of experience and in terms of what it implies and what kind of impact it has on life itself. So that's a really fun one, and that's one of the best ways to accelerate collective evolution, is to stack realities. And you can even start with your physical body and share everything essentially you know about it, and then step into your etheric body and share. And it's not that hard to do once I say what the constraints of each one are, and then you go astral and you get all the way up to even up to your spiritual body, your 5th body, which is the body of usually a Buddha. And you can even start to get in touch with your super consciousness directly. So that's a different way also to get into super consciousness, is through stacking realities. And then the 4th one is called opening present moment time cell convergence. That's where we do vision work to manifest in the world. Once you can stack realities, then you can get to a place where you want to open up something, say within 6 months. So you can actually stack the reality to the point where you get to that place where the present moment is one breath. It takes 6 months. And I'll leave I'll leave that to your imagination, how that might be. All I'll say is higher beings take longer to breathe than we do, and they can have a perception that can take a year, a month, a week, a day, an hour, compared to a perception for us, which may take like 3 seconds. And so it's very interesting when you start to align with beings like that, because the intelligence they have will imprint itself through your neural circuitry and through your brain cells, and give you incredible capacities to start to find ways to manifest what you want in life. And those usually are done. We almost always do that in a collective, because because once we've formed our sacred geometry prayer wheel, everybody has a position that they'll naturally find themselves in order to create this thing. And it's so much easier to create with more than just yourself. Especially when it comes to projects that we need to start creating now in relation to all the issues arising in the world at light speed heading toward us in a crazy way. And then the next one, after opening present moment, you're ready to do angelic invocation and enter into angelic chambers, which are basically their environments. And when I talk about angels, I'm talking about like a force of consciousness that might create all the oak trees on the planet, or that might be behind all the dolphin collective consciousness on the planet, or it might be behind what creates Buddhas on the planet out of human beings, or what might be behind all the crystals of a certain kind on the planet. Incredibly huge, vast organizing energies that are not only responsible for the chemical structuring and whatever shape, but also the interconnectedness to everything else in nature. That's what angels really are. And there's bigger ones that have to do with planetary motion and solar radiation and all kinds of things. Just so we start to understand what we really mean by angels, not these magical creatures that, go like Tinkerbell, that, hits you with your wand and you turn into a, something that you weren't before. No, they're actual forces of nature and supernature. And because there's also ones that work directly with consciousness, like compassion, or mercy, or love, or ecstasy, or rapture, or omniscience, you name it. So they work the whole spectrum from highest states of consciousness also into all kinds of matter. In fact, there's as far as I understand, between us and the source from which we come, there's 144 different dimensions of and you can call it angel as an overterm, but they really get way beyond what we would commonly call an angel. They become much more sophisticated and much more, as they get closer to the source, they become much more just awe-inspiring is all I can say. And to interact with them makes you feel like you're thinking 60,000 thoughts and you're understanding all of them, and they all make perfect sense, but you couldn't possibly explain it to anybody in 10 lifetimes. And that's the kind of thing that starts to happen when you start to interact with that. And then the next step is what I call macro-dimensional voyaging, writing the lines of awareness. When you get really good, you can just start writing. You can start tapping into like emanations of grace, or emanations of fluorescence, or virtue, or empathy, and you can just start writing them right back to the source from which they come. And that's a little bit more radical than the angelic invocation, because with the angelic invocation, you're depending on the angel for the insight, whereas when you go into macro-dimensional voyaging, you're doing it directly with yourself. You're going to go straight into that stuff on your own. Because angels are just messengers of the divine, so they just channel whatever frequencies they're meant to work with. But we can also jump, as humans, we can jump into any of the frequencies that are coming from source, up to a certain point. Beyond that, we'd lose our physical form because it would be too intense to maintain. But up to a certain point, we can handle, and it's amazing how much we can handle, especially if we've done a lot of meditation and know how to work with stillness. So, which is one of the best ways to channel higher consciousness, is through stillness. And that doesn't necessarily mean being a statue. It just means being without tension. True stillness just means being without tension. And then the next one, number 7, direct perception of reality, spiral to creation. That's when your vision starts to take on an ability to take in vast amounts of, how should I call it, information, almost like at a distance, where you can start to, these lines of awareness you've been writing, you go meta to that, and you can start to see what kind of spaces in existence you're covering. And that one's kind of hard to describe because it's literally like you become conscious of the forces that spin galaxies. It's at that level of understanding, and there are beings who do that, and it's literally their body that's doing that. But not only is it their body, but it's also the galaxy at the same time. So they're two distinct things, but they're also one thing. And up to those first 7, those are all things we can do as we evolve and get better at doing this stuff. The last 3 come from our gifts from above. You can't do those. Those happen to you. So when you start having encounters with ascended masters, what I call spontaneous presence arisings, for me, that just was about over a 9-month period toward the end of this 6-year period. I just had it was just a never-ending string of like what I would call diamond worlds and very beautiful beings that were that just would float in front of me and just sort of grok me and just sort of, I guess you could call it like a light pictograph, a highly dense codified symbolic transmission of information and energy and consciousness, and it's very interesting. And I'm sure that'll just keep unfolding in my life and be the source of tons and tons of insights that just always seem to keep happening. Like even right now, I feel like that part of me is speaking is kind of a vehicle for that kind of energy a lot, especially when I get into these deeper ones. The 9th one is really kind of almost fairy tale land, because you basically meet the 3 prime deities of all of existence, and you literally are taken in and embraced by them in a very unique way. And I'm not going to say exactly what that is because it's probably different for everybody, but I'll just say that I have a name for each. And the first source and center, which is commonly known as God, I call the infinite sphere of sheer presence. The second one, which is traditionally known as the eternal sun, I was part of what's called a ring of eternity with a lot of other beings, and we're all connected to the eternal sun. And the third is the infinite spirit, and that I call divine holiness, because when I was in the presence of that, I never felt anything more sacred and holy. It's just impossible. None of them I'm giving any justice in trying to describe, except I give them names, so maybe that's, that's my way of seeing them. The infinite sphere, the ring of eternity, and the divine holiness. And then the final one, Buddha nature manifestations. Well, the only one I know of for sure is the day before I got this name down here, spontaneous jewel cluster. And it wasn't it was really weird because it wasn't a verbal thing. I was just laying down after doing a very intensive moving meditation. So and the point at the end was just to relax everything and lay down. And from 1 minute to the next, I was Dharmendra, and the next minute I was spontaneous jewel cluster, and every fiber and cell of my being knew that I was spontaneous jewel cluster. And I don't know how I knew it. I just knew it. There was nothing there. There was no duration of time. It was just bam. Now my whole being just said spontaneous jewel cluster. So I took that as a Buddha nature manifestation, meaning that was my Buddha name. And it's funny because the guy who was my spiritual master the day before in a meditation appeared to me, and I hadn't seen him since he left the world, like 10 years before, ever. And he did not, and it wasn't a vague or drifty kind of vision. He was there, even more lucid than you and I now, looking at each other off to my right, just looking at me for this whole meditation. And I thought, that's interesting. And boy, he sure has a lot of love. He seems like he's got more love now out of his body than he did when he was in his body. That's the only time I ever saw him. It was just for that hour. And it was just absolutely clear, crystal clear, that it was him and that he was there. And the next day, this thing happened with the spontaneous jewel cluster. So I guess that maybe was kind of the his coming to acknowledge or something like that. So I don't know. This is just kind of a modern interpretation, I guess you could say, of the 10 Bodhisattva grounds and what somebody in the modern world might go through to go from being a disciple to being a Buddha. So anyway, that I just wanted to share that because that's kind of more about my inner beauty, my siddha. This is my siddha. This is my beauty. This is my creativity, and it's just what happened to me. This is just commentary. What I do with it is what I do with you guys, and anybody else who allows me to do that. So I hope that was useful and may spark insights or inspiration in you guys. And I at this point I'm done sharing my shadow, my gift, and finally got into my siddha in a way that is all connected to the creation of all of this and what the vegan synergy meditation is about and what my vision is of it for how we can develop it together. And so that's all I got on that. So if anybody else would like to start their sequence of Shadow Gifts Siddha, and however you would like to do it, I am going to go into silence. And thank you for listening.
Dang, Dharmendra. That gives me hope. Thank you.
You know, and let me know if the microphone is working well or not. But when I listen to you, thank you. When I listen to you, Dharmendra, I just feel peace. I just feel like this profound inner peace. And kind of regardless of what you're talking about, but you have a real gift, my brother, and I'm very grateful.
You know, that's probably the best feedback I've ever heard, because what inspired me back in 1973 when I was 14 was the show with David Carradine, Kung Fu. And the guy was basically he was an enlightened martial artist, and he was just the most peaceful man. But obviously he was being pursued by very dark people, and he had to use his martial arts all the time. But he was a super martial artist, and he was, you know. So, but the peacefulness part was the part that I always loved. So thank you, Jamin. I'm glad that that comes across, because to me the peacefulness is the proof. If peacefulness is not coming across, I don't care what you're saying or what you can do. We're not talking about the same thing that I'm talking about when I talk about Buddha or Buddha nature. That's peacefulness. That's what comes across. The physical, there's no harm anymore coming from this vehicle. There's nothing left that's going to harm anybody. It's all about taking care of my brothers and sisters. And I mean, including all animals and all beings. When I say brothers and sisters, that's what I mean. So thank you. That's very real to me. That's cool. And I really feel like I do want to be a little bit bolder than the teachers of the past in this regard, in this kind of way, because I think now it's time and people are ready to hear it, and also ready to feel inspired and encouraged to step into it themselves more and more, because that's what we need, instead of the kind of person who wouldn't say certain things because it just wasn't what a Buddha said or this or that. Number one rule of a Buddha is there is no rules. So you are allowed to be, you are irrepeatable as a Buddha, and there is no right or wrong way to be a Buddha. Anybody who says that doesn't know what they're talking about. There is no such thing. That peacefulness is the number one thing, I would say. That has to be the first thing that you pick up. And then from there, everything else, all the other cool stuff will come. But the peacefulness is the biggest in this sector of reality. The peacefulness encompasses more than anything else, because with peacefulness, everything is allowed to be as it is. So there's nothing left out of peacefulness. There's nothing left out of it. It's like when love has come and done its work, what's left is peace. That's, That's what it is. So this was a very nice way to open the meeting. Amir and I had talked about a week or two ago that I should open a meeting like this, in this way, with the siddha, with the peacefulness, instead of the other way around. But somehow it worked out anyway. I still went through the shadow and the gifts, but this is really the way. I mean, more and more I'm hoping to open the meetings with this kind of a vibration, and it'll be something else next time. Might be more blissful, more ecstatic, more celebrative, more, I don't know, more silent. Who knows? Peacefulness today, which is always really the beginning of all the rest of it, because once peace is there, everything else can come.
I don't know if anyone wanted to speak first, but if you guys are okay in the car with me saying something, that would work for you guys. Okay, I don't always want to be the first one speaking. I know I'm a sun person and I talk a lot. um, I love the synchronicity that happens when we get together like this, because Dharmendra, a lot of what you brought up today and expressed through your process or journey, through shadow to gift to um, um, sharing and releasing that.
Siddha was the last one.
Thank you
Siddha.
very much. Siddha. What does that mean, actually, Siddha?
Siddha is the exact translation is something like a. I mean, I to be honest, the exact translation I know is some fancy Hindu definition that sort of metaphorically hints at it, but it's a superpower. It's a supernatural ability. It's a miraculous capacity. Um, it's so that's what a siddha is. It's like you're taking and you're so open that your divinity can come through. Put it that way. That's really the best way to say it.
That's really nice. Thank you. So my shadow, the last 48 hours, I guess I could say, or even a bit longer, has really been this frustration when you talked about this sort of ignorance that people agree to buy into. For me, I was having frustration with ignorance, not necessarily just around veganism, but around just everything generally, and why those of us doing this work aren't getting recognized, supported, and somehow given the platform for greater visibility. So I have great frustration there around that. The gift, I guess, that I could say comes out of that, maybe. I mean, I still have some of that shadow there, so I can't say I worked it all through yet. It's
Okay, but before you go mental on it,
yeah.
take it and do what we do and bring it up into your heart and love, and just like a mother with a child, just give it a lot of love, and then let yourself speak from there, because you were just starting to, you're kind of like in the same mental space as you were with the shadow, and you're trying to go into the gift with the I guess thing. Just that's just a reflection I'm having. It might be a little bit more smooth for you if you do it this way, to transition into your gift of it.
It just makes me want to laugh, actually, when I do that, sort of like giggle. Kind of this release. Um, I guess a word comes to me when I put it here in my heart, and kind of just love that frustration and that shadow. It's called courage and empathy. These are the two words that I get. The courage to speak my mind about things that I find are not okay, like eating meat, but also having empathy for those who are still practicing things that are hurting the earth. And I guess that brings power. I don't mean power over, it brings this kind of energy to it where messages can be transmitted lovingly for transformation, possible transformation, because it's everybody's choice how they want to, of course, accept a message and how they want to act on it. So one of the things that's coming to me, it's a little story just about Christmas. They serve turkey. I can't believe it. Anyway, Jamin and I are going vegan, so we only eat vegetables. And we chose to gift family members Will Tuttle's book, The World Peace Diet, which was very successfully received. So that was great. And I did go into the kitchen and say to my family, look at that poor bird who's been murdered. I was courageous about it. And I was kind of in everybody's face about it. But I did it it was interesting because I didn't do it as an attack. I just did it as a truth. And people received it. They didn't necessarily not eat the turkey, but I felt like they could hear what I was saying. There wasn't resistance. And some family members said, well, I've been vegan before, but now I'm vegetarian. Or so I don't know if some people were open to the idea of change. Others just will do business as usual. But I was courageous about actually saying something which I've never done before in a family situation like that.
Yeah, that's usually a good sign of a gift is you have to kind of cross a boundary that you've never crossed before. You have to kind of go across a threshold, and you kind of have to take a risk. So that's good. There's something in what you're saying that I know that's deeper than that, and I'll ask it to you this way. You started to tap into it through the empathy thing, because that's a siddha. Real empathy is a siddha. That's literally to be able to put yourself in another's position, no matter what it is, including animals getting slaughtered. But anyway, and with total awareness. But if you were to distill the essence of the intelligence you're describing that has to do with the empathy and the kind of acceptance of where others are at, but at the same time having the courage to also state who you are. If you were to offer that as a gift to God, how would you offer it? What would be on the plate? That's a nice way to think of a siddha. How would you offer that to the divine? Because that'll bring out something in you.
I think this is where my artist comes into play, and that is how I offer always myself to the divine, is through the creativity that I've been given in this lifetime, or chosen, or blessed with, or all those things.
So what would you create then out of that? What would you create? What do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you sense? What do you smell? What are you touching?
Well, actually, it's funny you're asking me that question, because the last couple of weeks I've been kind of thinking about, well, how would I create an installation that's about veganism and about, offsetting, do I do an installation that shows the violence and then that shows the peace? So I've kind of been exploring that. I don't really know yet, Dharmendra. It's there sitting, waiting for, that's how it works for me creatively, is that things will start to percolate and then I have to hold it for a while as other forces, I guess, are working through me, and then
Yeah.
suddenly it'll just happen.
You know,
But I don't attach to anything yet.
yeah,
And I'm holding space.
you know what came spontaneously into my, because I can visualize things very easily. um, well, because I went through, like 300 hours of NLP hypnosis training, so you learn that stuff. But I saw with your hands, you were describing a scene that went from the violence and included everything in between all the way to the beauty at the other side and the peaceful spiritualness. Kind of like a whole, I don't even know, you know what it is. I wouldn't even know how to call it, but it's just a sequence that just was one flow right from the one into the other and everything in between. That's what I saw when you were describing.
Yeah, I think that's pretty close to the vision I was carrying in me. Thank you. Yeah.
It was inspirational, so I couldn't help it. So, but I'm just gonna push a little bit more and ask you if you could put a word to it, a sacred name or word or something that would make you feel that, that whatever that is you're describing there, that's the essence, the quintessence of it.
The word that's coming to me is jubilation. Um, yeah, I think it's jubilation and
Could you unpack that a little bit?
well, actually, I'm going to change that.
Okay.
What I would rather say is what I'm feeling is complete stillness. Like I don't feel like I have to do anything or be anything. I just have to be still today. That's where I'm at with with everything. It's just like
I think you hit it because I just went into a deep stillness when you said that. That's usually how you can tell if somebody hits a siddha, because you become a tuning fork instantly. That's how you know. You just hit me very, very strong. I felt like a tuning fork of your stillness there. Very clear, very lucid. See, that's the best. If you can really just come into the now and just, because a lot of it's just to try and provoke you to get to that place that you just came from, you know? Because as you can see in the way I shared tonight, it's always about getting to the now. I might start with whatever I did, but when I got to the final point, it's like, this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm at, and this is what I'm envisioning as a result of that. You know what I mean? So if you
yeah.
can bringing that stillness is just as powerful. That's because it's it's real. It's a force.
Yeah, and sometimes we look too far, and if you just pause and just see, like you're saying, in the now,
Mm-hmm.
it's right there. It's right here. It's like
Yep. Yep.
I
Mm-hmm.
can feel it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's note number 2. So um, anybody else feel like um, taking a step in from the shadowland into the gift, into the siddha?
Well, what came to me when I just stepped out of the car is very recently I felt scattered mentally and kind of having a hard time deciding how to basically how to prioritize things and commit to something, and I kind of feel like I'm jumping mentally back and forth between things. Um, and hmm. And I felt that kind of along with that scatteredness, I felt um, my overall amount of presence and ability to empathize has felt very constricted recently and lessened, and I've kind of and I'll kind of beat myself up for that. And I don't know, there's been a kind of flurry. I'm having a hard time talking about it it's it's been a flurry. There's been a bunch of things that have just been going in my head, and I haven't really I guess I haven't taken the appropriate amount of time recently to just sit with those thoughts or feelings and let them pass, um, and come back to that stillness. I've It's been very frantic, um, but and I'm still not totally clear on how this progression works through the shadow gift siddha. But a more gifty thing that's coming to me now is I feel like once things are clarified, I feel like I'll have an abundance of energy to work. And right now, it's kind of a matter of I'm not really sure where to put that energy. And so since I've been unsure, I haven't put it very wholeheartedly into anything recently. Um, and I guess I'll stay in the shadow a little bit more and say that I've felt this uh, antisocial tendency in me coming back, um, reminiscent of my time in like middle school. Um, I was homeschooled. My mom schooled me until sixth grade was the first year I spent in public school, and I didn't really have any. I had some friends, like outside of family, that uh, I wasn't very close to. And I just had a really hard time connecting with people and was very much out of the loop. And and this kind of, I keep going, I keep wanting to go back and forth between shadow and a gift, because now I'm thinking, well, that kind of social isolation kind of helped me. I was way more focused and motivated to do well in school. And I think that has a lot to do with bringing me where I am today. But it's also made I don't know, I guess when I'm not like well rested, right? Or there's some, it doesn't even have to be huge catastrophe, just some stressors. I can very easily go to this place where I am retracting and I have a hard time fully being there with other people, especially if it's kind of, on the superficial end of things, small talk end of things, that there's a large part of me that just totally like shrivels up and will just not be there with that. And I've been feeling a lot of that recently. And I'm starting to realize well, just how debilitating that can be, and how I really need to find a way through that, in order to, I mean, ultimately this whole collective intelligence operation is about uniting people, and which is kind of and so there's some weird kind of ironic tension there. I don't know, where, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm going all over the place right now.
No, you're clear. You're clear.
Okay.
May I say something?
Yeah.
Not to really interrupt, but just something I'm noticing since I've met you, and we've been doing these meetings and the the Radical Collective Intelligence meetings and the Vegan Collective Intelligence meetings, is that you have when you speak, it's like you really have there's something about the way you speak that makes me want to really give you my attention. So there's a quality in there that I'm just maybe going to reflect it to you, because it might be something that can help you get in touch more with the gift to Siddha connection about you. But there's some amazing quality you have in your presence when you're presenting your scenario that just makes you have my rapt attention. Every time you're speaking, I'm just like riveted on you. I don't know what that is, but you do something when you speak. So I don't know if it's your considerateness or your methodicalness or your deep care you put into every little thing you're saying, and just how much you give it attention in the way you do. I don't know what it is, but it's just it's very unique. Something you have that comes through in what you're saying, it along with whatever it is you're saying. So there's always some quality in whatever you're saying, whether it's the shadow or you're scattered or this or that or whatever. That's a gift. That it's a magneticness. It's a magnetic drawing power you have that pulls people into what you're saying. And because you speak in such a way that you really have to listen to it too. It's really well thought out. So even if you didn't think about it ever, it just comes out that way. And it makes you want to consider it and really pay attention. So I'll just throw that in because I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
I would love to throw something into Nolan Dharmendra. Thoughtfulness, yeah, definitely, Nolan. A lot of thoughtfulness. And when I was listening to you, and I also find you very easy to listen to, regardless of what state you're in. But really, for me, you took us on a journey. And it's interesting that you see it as being scattered because I saw it as a journey where you took us from this island to this place, to this place, to this place. And that might be kind of an interesting way for you to explore those emotions and thoughts that you have. You see it as your journey to get somewhere you're wanting to go. Or you don't know where it's going to take you, but it's taking you somewhere, which is kind of cool, you know?
Well, that's kind of the feeling of this whole this whole thing. Yeah, especially, yeah, I don't know. Feels like we're really going into uncharted territory, and I ask myself pretty often, how uncharted is it? And the answer to that question freaks me out a lot. Yeah, but I really appreciate your guys' feedback, and I think that's incredibly, yeah, I think I think I get really hung up on basically what I'm outputting or like extroverting, and that's kind of the thoughtfulness, care with my words, but it's a double-edged sword, I guess, because if I don't output, then I never get those beautiful reflections that you guys are giving me now. And that's huge, because even in just that, like 1 or 2 minutes from you guys, your responses just felt like they were unlocking me. So thank you for that.
There seems also to be a parallel between right now what the three of us have expressed. And I'm just coming back to the siddha of like from judgment to, you know, from speaking our truth to empathy, you know, and so that's what I'm getting too from you, Nolan, is like you're from here to over there. What is that over there? You know?
Well, it's interesting that you use the word judgment, Melissa, because the sequence on that, genetically speaking, and it's not like the ultimate rule, but it's a fun one to play with. It goes judgment, integrity, perfection. And what I was thinking, Nolan, is you're perfect as you are. You don't. It's not like you need to improve something. You know, if any, and you're our future, dude. So we're all really interested in listening to you. I think just simply because you're from the future. And you're whatever you're doing is different than what any of the rest of the three of us are doing. What the rest of the three of us are doing is more similar than it is dissimilar. What you're doing is something else altogether. It's obvious, but that's why you have my total rapt attention, because it's so fresh, it's so new, it's so untried, it's so uncontrived, you know. and it's so cutting edge. It's just right out there in the uncharted space, and you're going for it. You don't, you're doing it. You're just jumping in, and you'll figure it out. That takes tremendous courage.
And you have your mask off.
Right.
So many of us wear masks, and then we learn to take them off, or hopefully. But you're not wearing a mask. Like, you are you, and that's a really refreshing quality, And so you speaking the truth or truths from your soul. And I can imagine that's confusing, but I think what's really exciting is, like, Dharmendra, what you took us through right at the beginning, like this charting unknown territories. So for someone like myself, I get really excited about that. I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. I love being out in uncharted territories. In fact, it gets me into trouble. I'm a Sagittarius. I'm out there going, yeah, let's go figure this out. Let's go fly over here. Let's go. And then I'm like, oh, I forgot my parachute. That's just my personality. But I think, it can be really enjoyable too. Like, and I think it's just learning these tools and techniques, that Dharmendra is mentioned, that can help you navigate uncharted territories and open up whole new worlds for you that are super helpful, exciting, beautiful, interesting, creative. I could go on.
Yeah, and what you're saying gave me a pause for a moment to recollect the fact that all those different stages I was talking about, those 10 stages, are actually they're interwoven in everything we're doing too. And if it was never even mentioned, eventually all those skills would come out eventually anyway, because it's all in there, because I'm here and that's what that is. You know what I'm saying? And but also I see too, and the teacher I had, it wasn't spelled out like that, because I guess he got it in a different way, but eventually I pulled all that out of it, I guess you could say. So it must have been in there somehow. It just wasn't, done that way. So the thing, I just want to shift all of a sudden, but that was just a point I wanted to make, that it's all interwoven, it's all in there. And I think that's very well spoken, what you said, Melissa, on that point. That was a really good point. I'm starting to, with you, Melissa, I'm starting to, whenever you speak, I'm letting my visual capacity go freeform, and every time you speak, you speak in pictures. You create paintings with what you say, and so it's real easy to understand you when I get it like that, because then I go, oh, okay. But see, that's what'll start to happen too. There's lots of little sidebars in those 10 steps that I didn't even mention that'll be coming out here and there. But once we get to know each other better through this, we'll literally be able to see each other's thoughts, especially when we're cooking, and that gets really fun. Because we're talking like sacred geometry and painting, like what you do with painting your thoughts the way you do. I didn't know anybody could do that. That was really cool. Anyway, and then it's just the way you described the way you saw Nolan taking us on a journey. And the minute you said it, I looked back through what Nolan said, and I said, oh, it's totally true. I was in this cave and we were checking out this stuff, and I had a headlamp on, and then all of a sudden we saw a few things, and it's really like that. I mean, that's my mind. My mind is like super visual, creative, does all these trippy things. But
I have something funny to say, or a connection to make, which is I was also visualizing a cave, and I was thinking, when you were talking about uncharted territory, the feeling I have right now is less so like, oh my gosh, we're going into this cave that no one's ever been before, and are we prepared? It's more, I feel like we're entering this space, and I'm not afraid of going into it as much as I am afraid of making too much noise in it. if that makes sense. Like, and I don't know, maybe Dharmendra, I'd really appreciate your input on this,
Yeah,
but
I was just about to come in with something even on what you said so far, and then you can always come in too whenever something hits you too.
sure, go ahead. Yeah.
It's like I was saying earlier about stillness. It doesn't mean you're stiff and not moving like a shadow. It means there's no tension, right? There's no stress. There's perfect absence of stress, right? And then when you're talking about silence, it doesn't mean that there aren't words going through your head or you're not speaking. It just means that none of it's unnecessary. Whatever is coming up is a part of, it's a part of it. It adds to each thing being its unique presentation in the moment. To me, that's true stillness. It doesn't mean, I mean silence, true silence. It doesn't mean that it's the silence of a cemetery. It's more like the silence of outer space, which isn't really silent. It's full of something in you. It's almost overpoweringly present, but it's not sound in the way we usually think of it. It's not sound, but it's just, true silence is like thundering. If it's really true silence, so yes, it does require, in a more practical sense, it does require a silent witnessing receptivity, a kind of state of receptivity within your being that's silent and still, that's just held there. I mean, it's important to know how to apply things and where to apply them and what to apply them to and why you're applying them. It's not because people take things and they smear it out all over everything. Okay, silent, that means everybody, there's no noise and da-da-da. No, it means there's a still small space within you where that silent voice of divinity can speak to you. That's what the silence is for, so you can hear what needs to be heard. Because nothing is there just for no reason, just like that goes on forever and just encompasses and overwhelms everything. That's silly, but that's how we see it. That's how we think it. That's what we think siddhas are too. They're not. They each have a very specific way of landing inside you, and from there, of course, how it spreads. You have everything is got a place and a purpose and a meaning. It's we randomly associate things in ways they don't belong. But when you start to find out where each thing comes to rest, wherever you come to rest, that's your silence. That's what silence is. Wherever you come to rest, that's your silence. And if there's no tension and there's an absence of stress, then there's stillness. And out of that, that's where solutions are. Solutions are always in that place, because they're going to want their existence abhors a vacuum. So something, but it's going to come in with great respect, because nothing rushes into a place that's totally still and silent. Not from existence, it doesn't. Maybe on this planet, we won't even get into the idiocy that goes on this planet and what they do to silent, still spaces that are created out there in the world, temples, whatever, because of differences of ideologies. But within yourself, it's a totally different experience. Nothing comes into a silent, still space unless it's worthy of coming in there. That's why it's worth creating a silent, still space within you, because that's where you can attract things that are worth attracting. And we may not always know how that's going to play out because of the way we're taught to think about how to make things practical. But that's not how existence works. It plants itself within you, and it could come out anywhere in your life through any kind of situation. And you never know where that's going to be. And sometimes if you get into the right situation, you can plan that kind of stuff and you can actually get creative about it and make it actually come out. And some of that sometimes here we'll focus on directly so we can actually see specifically certain things that we want to come out. And most of the time it's just going to come out. That's what these meetings are designed to do. They're designed to fill you in those silent, still inner spaces. That's why we go to the siddhas, because when that comes in, that's when something is going to come out. But again, you don't know how that's going to come out. And it's not really complicated. If you really wanted to follow it, you could see exactly what course it would take to do. But that's a lot of energy just for one thing, when so many things are coming through and so many things need to happen. Right now, out of all of us. And I'm trying to give you more like images that can be useful to you, energy flows and sort of geometric patterns. I'm really trying to speak more to you in that way, to sort of give you the actual sacred geometry of what I'm saying instead of just giving you words. I'm trying to give you a sense of how it actually moves and flows. By the way I'm talking, not necessarily by the way my hands are moving. I'm just doing that to demonstrate what I'm trying to demonstrate. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that was useful and could enlighten somewhat the subject you wished for a little light to be shed on. And otherwise, you could take us a little more into the future, and we can light that up a little bit too, if you want, if there's more there.
Well, I guess I
But
feel like
give me 1 second, because I want to include Jamin in this now, and not necessarily that he has to. I don't expect you don't need to do any of this, Jamin, if you don't want. But I want to right now give us each a direction, so we can throw the sacred geometry prayer wheel in and do a little reality stacking, so we get at least 3 steps into this a little bit. Since we're in it, the great thing about, to me, smaller intimate things is we can do more stuff, and we can play with more depths, you know. So there's north, which is matter. There's south, which is, you got to give me a second, because I'm going to do these in a deeper way than it's usually done. South is spirit, north is matter, east is mind, and west is feelings. Okay, so who wants to be what? And I'm not going to be spirit this time. Somebody else is going to do it. In fact, you want to be spirit?
Yeah.
Okay, you're south, you're warm, you're what? You're the cauldron. That's the south, you're the cauldron. So just make that your overall intent for the rest of whatever we're doing this evening. So you're the south. Okay. Yes? Jamin?
I'll be matter.
Matter, the north. North, that's the cool, the cold, the stone, the crystal. The crystal's a good one. It's fun to play with the light, the spirit in the crystal. And normally I would choose mind, but I'm going to choose feeling, west. So you're left with east, mind.
all right.
Nolan, your mind, you're the east. You're the light, breezy. It's that kind of mind, though. The light, breezy, very light and breezy. That's and friendly and like that. And the feeling is kind of, it's deep and mysterious and can be kind of hidden and withdrawn, and like I'm doing right now. That's why I generally don't tend to choose the west, because it's kind of considered the darkness in a sort of moving sort of way, not in the darkness like a bad sort of way, just in the way it moves. It's hidden. It's a lot of hiddenness. So from that light and breezy mental mind of yours, Nolan, was there anything else you wanted to play around with here today?
Yeah, I guess. I feel like we're entering this. We're kind of opening. It feels like we're opening Pandora's box to me with collective intelligence. And I mean that in a neutral way when I say that. But when I say neutral, I mean to imply both ends of the spectrum there.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, recently I've experienced some I've had some really nasty experiences And I don't know. Well, I feel like I've kind of maybe, I'm not sure where you were trying to take this. I feel like I don't want to, I don't know if there's, I want to be sensitive to where we want to go tonight.
Right. So that this is always fun when you see, when you start adding more steps on, it gets easier to do. So with the thinking capacity, right? It's always about, think about it when a person who thinks, a thinker walks into the room, they look at everything in relation to everything else, how big this is, how small that is, how far that is away from that, what color that is, how many lines are in that chair compared to the dots in that chair over there, what color shirt that person is wearing, and how many people are wearing a shirt that color, and those glasses over there, and only 3 people are wearing glasses, and 1 person isn't, and 2 other people have these strange eye patches on, and I don't know what kind of a party I just entered into, but this is all very interesting. And so that's a thinking person. And a moody person, a feeling person like me, would walk into a room and go, oh wow, this vibe, it feels very light and airy, and over in that corner and over there something really heavy is happening, and over there it looks like, oh, I don't want to go over there, that's freaking me out, I don't like that place over there. And then an intuitive person walks in and goes, oh my God, I've been here before. This reminds me of a place where everybody was working on a sculpture of a dog that was half shaved, held by a man with a toga on. And the theme of it was, you see, and that's an intuitive person. They're looking for, where is it ultimately going? What is the ultimate significance of it? And then the matter person is all about sensing. Walks into there and goes, I'm hungry. I'm going over here and I'm going to grab this. Give me a beer. Hey, baby, bam. How you doing? I need to dance a little bit, man. Let's get moving here. You know? So it's just to give you a sense of, that's the psychological types of Jung. That's a gloss we can put on the 4 directions that works really well and helps it bring it into a user-friendly way of space. And it's not, I mean, obviously, you know, I could have more easily done the thinker, and you could have more easily done the feeler, Nolan, but I didn't want to do it that way. I wanted to give everybody one that they wouldn't normally choose on their own, because you have to get used to all positions and how to use each one differently. Like, I have to draw out my words a little bit so that a mood is created with the way I'm speaking, which is very difficult for me to do.
Well, as the cauldron of spirits, when I hear Pandora's box mentioned, I go, yeah, let's open that box and let's see what's inside.
Mhm.
Oh, look, there's some of those and some of those. Oh, and there's some of those. And could we put those together and make something really cool out of that?
Jamin.
At your service.
Shadow Gift Sitta, your turn.
All right. So Shadow, lately I've just been present to that I've, I feel like I'm not producing results or solid milestone achievements towards our shared goal, which is shared to a degree, and then each of us kind of has our own sort of goals, but there is this shared goal called collective intelligence manifested in the world, that in turn can be generating all these solutions and implementation and transformations and all kinds of amazing stuff. And I think back to when I was in my late 20s, in particular, just how productive I was. You know, I could just get up in the morning and just produce, even if it was something totally new, something no one had done before, that would be a multi-month project or whatever. I could just get in there and go. And so the gift is that I have that ability inside me. And I have some knowledge of how to access it. And, you know, this is where some of my shadows from previous meetings are relevant, where I've, you know, gotten into cannabis and alcohol. And in recent weeks, I've made huge strides in getting out of that, out of those substances. I still have work to do, but I feel really great about progress thus far. And so I kind of feel like I'm entering this clearing where I can now put my life and Melissa in my life and Nolan in my life, you Dharmendra and my life, our lives in order, taking full responsibility for my portion of that. But I imagine and feel and think that that will have very real impacts and ripple effects for the whole pond of all of us. And at this point, I'd like to ask for your guidance, Dharmendra, as to where to go next.
Yeah, I had I had a whole string of things as you were speaking. You're like a Zorba the Greek, creative genius, kind of mad scientist, really fun to be around sort of person. And you have entered into a connection that you've never had before, that is showing you things the way I like to say it is, you never knew you never knew. You just didn't even know they were there. You didn't even know that existed. So how could you know it? And you've wisely taken a step back. Your body made you stop, gave you a little something to chew on for a while, so you had to stop, because you won't stop otherwise. And yeah, and you're gonna, all the things that you are describing about yourself, that you know about yourself, of course, very well, are going to come into the fore again with enhanced capacities. And I think my thought on the matter is, which may not be the ultimate authority on that would be you always, but and your inner divinity. But what I see is that if you could trust to this moment and say the hell with all that way of strategizing of your past, which was useful when you were half your age, which is just going to send you to an early grave now, is about all it will do now, and make you use substances because you'll be burning at both ends, and that's the only way you're going to be able to psychologically deal with it. Rather, why not just mature into the new kind of psychology that's growing in you, and the heart that's coming through it, and everything else, and the maturity and the patience and all of that, and just because that's been the hardest thing for me, to wait as long as I have for it to come out of me, because I was told it wouldn't come out until after 50, but geez, it was after 60, so it took a long time. And much to many of my very close people's chagrin. But, you know, it comes out when it's supposed to come out, and existence knows you've got a message, you know, and it knows that it needs to get out there. You don't know how quick, or it really needs to come, and you don't even know for sure 100% if what it is you want to come out with is exactly what's needed, but you'd like to put your faith into that, and have, you know, a lot of backing behind it. And I think it all is going to come out as it needs to, in just the way, you know, that you know it needs to, but in a whole new way. I just think it's going to be in a different way than what you're used to. And I think if you can just trust to that and be a little more feminine in your approach to all of it, you know, that you'll also get a lot wiser in the process. And I wanted to tell you recently, don't stop doing what you're doing, whatever you do. Even if you're giving a lot more, you know, respect and honor to the feminine principle in whatever way it manifests around you, and do that, but do that while still maintaining your integrity and your also your masculinity and whatever you have to bring with that, because that's beautiful. And that has a lot, there's a lot to offer in that. There's a lot of strength, incredible amount of strength there in so many ways. In so many ways, you have such a multi-dimensional strength to you, and that lends an arm to, and you just, like I was saying to Nolan earlier, I don't even think you realize all the ways that you lend that strength around you. It's really the true lion, that I think of a lion when I think of that, but kind of like a Hollywood lion, you know, who's a little bit playful and, you know, jovial and not so brr and serious and get out of my way. But, you know, because you have that side to you. If you go there, it gets a little dragonish, and it doesn't need to be dragonish, or at least not grumpy dragonish. Not all dragons are. There's some cool dragons too, but you know, more of a jovial lion kind of guy. So that's just the hit I get is just you just keep going. Don't slow down 1 second. Don't do that. But maybe if you just let go a little bit of how you think it should go, and instead just go. I mean, that's the only way I can do what I do. I come up with stuff at the beginning, you know, and ideas, but I just have to, the minute I started, I let go of control, and then it just goes where it just goes, however it needs to go. You know, and that way you somehow trick yourself into bringing yourself fully here, and you really give your totality, but you don't get in the way. Of it unfolding, you know. Because the world needs people like you to do what you do, because you are you're more than a leader. You're like an educator, you know. And educators to me are the highest. They're the ones, because that's how everybody evolves and grows. Leaders just lead into one thing or another. Educators have to help people to refine who they are. That's a different thing, you know. It's not just about taking somebody from A to B. It's what happens between A and B that they become a better person. You know, that's an educator. It's different. And I don't know if you've ever seen yourself as an educator, or maybe you have been one, I don't know, but you come across as a leader, but you're not really a leader. You're more of an educator. In the sense of, and don't let your ego get this too much, but in the sense of the way an emperor, in the real divine sense of the word, not in the way it got trashed in Japan, but in the way an emperor is an educator through everything he does, and through the very lifestyle he lives, and the way he treats the emperor has access to every dimension of society and knows how to act absolutely appropriately in every dimension of society. And the original emperor earned that, because the original emperor was connected with divinity, but then it got into formality and lost the essence. Just like the church, all churches lose the essence of the transmission and get lost in ritual and formality, and it becomes a dead thing, you know?
There's a story that came to me, Damon, while you were talking. I forgot the story because I was in such deep trance when I was listening to you, and Dharmendra just pulled it back out into the surface by the word emperor, because it's about Emperor Hadrian, who was a very great Roman emperor. And this is a quote from, the story comes from Margaret Yourcenar's book called Memoirs of Hadrian. And it's Hadrian who's lying in a bath of warm water. He slit his wrist because he's a really old man. He's dying and he's going to help himself along. And he's remembering himself as a young warrior when he was 20. And he's watching these young Roman soldiers on horseback riding along the beach through the waves. And he's remembering that power and strength and manlyhoodness of being on the horse and just all that energy and strength and power. And he says, but now I'm an old man and I have surpassed the rider on the horse and I have now become the waves.
Hmm.
And I
Wow.
think that's a really good story for you. This time when we, leave that physical strength and power in that outward manifestation of it way and come into inner wisdom, which requires stillness, where we go beyond just matter and become, the whole, the wave, and I think that's what I see you becoming. It's like you're becoming the way. You're not just making the way, you're becoming the way. So how do you hold that? And that's time too. So I think sometimes we have to get out of that time thing. That's just a creation of man's mind.
And that's a good example, Melissa, of going from a gift to a siddha, where you go from being on the horse riding and then all of a sudden you become the wave, the pure movement. That's a good example, right in a natural metaphor kind of thing. That was really good. And also the way you expressed it, from the outer expression of power to the inner wisdom. Yeah. So those are good examples of just because I want to mention it, because this is what Vegan Synergy Meditation is all about: transition from the shadow to the gift to the siddha at the initial stages. So that was a really good example of Jamin and the possibility, as you envision it, seeing him moving from the gift to the siddha. So I don't know. There might be something also there that I see in you, Jamin, that has that capacity to really step into your own awakening, because I think you also, on some very profound level, understand that that's what's needed now. It's not just about these clever, high-level strategists, technological envisionings. It's more about stepping into your own fullness and owning it, and then just turning that on full blast and letting it come out in whatever way it needs to into the world, like an emperor who could act any way, anywhere, with anybody in the right way for any reason. Whether it's, if you think of an emperor into the full scope, they can create things, they can just have tea, they can play with kids, they can take a walk on the beach with the dog, they can go play sports, they can do whatever they want, and they can do it all extremely well because that's what an emperor does. So it's just, and it's a lot. What I'm also bringing is a well-roundedness, that you become aware of all of what we are, the whole circle, the whole zodiac, all 64 gene keys that cover the same territory as the zodiac does, but on a genetic level. So it's really in our bodies. So it's really something we have to and can encompass and realize and experience. We may not necessarily perfectly master all of it, but we can taste every single one of those 64 siddhas, and a lot, not just once. And we can do whole strings of them, like a musical symphony, when we start really getting our voyaging circles, cooking. We're doing a little, and we're starting tonight, because we jumped out at just the first level, and then Melissa started stacking a little bit there. That's what stacking realities is, when you jump from one level of reality to another, and you use that metaphor to do it, and a real life example, so that our hearts are with you and are getting lifted by the meaning of the story.
Wow, thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned the wave, Melissa. When I first jumped into the cannabis industry, which was just not even in existence as a legal social use industry, and we did our first press conference, and then suddenly we were at kind of at the center of it. I told my colleagues and friends, it's like at first we were riding the wave like a surfer, and then we became the wave. And anyway, and what you're describing about Emperor really has a lot of those qualities, and that was 7 years ago, right? Now we're ready for the next wave, and I'm ready to become that wave, or becoming that wave.
And perhaps at this point I could share that it's meant for us, with the upbringing we're given in our conditioning, to create a perfect ego that can crystallize and become successful, can become, an object of attention and respect and admiration and all those things. But it came from ego, which means masks and posturings and self-image and all these different things. The transition now, that kind of just opened up from what you said and what we're all saying, but the transition now is into essence, which is not ego. It is the end. It is the end of ego. It is the dissolution of ego. And the more you go into essence, the deeper places of ego will come up, and eventually they'll just realize that there's no hope. They might as well surrender now and just become part of that individuality, which is a crescendo of essence. It's a flowering of essence. That's what individuality is, and it's your authentic self. So that's kind of that's why I've been, or that's why I suggested earlier when you had asked me to about a new way, and definitely the wave captures that much more than the guy on the the horse who's all in control and authority, and instead it's more about it's the ego. The essence is more about valor, valor in the truest meaning of the word, which is you're going to stake your it's the death of the ego. You're going to stake your ego. You're going to stake all of that which you've become and based your success on, and that's going to be sacrificed. That has to be sacrificed to get to step into the new. because then it's like it all of a sudden becomes real, and everything that you had before now becomes used in a new way with a whole new purpose. Instead of being weapons of whatever, the winds of war, they become the instruments of transformation, a whole different kind of feeling and focus there. So and then we can even go to a fourth step, which we haven't gone into. The fourth step of the steps I said, it's called opening the present moment, where we can open up a moment and just maybe meander into what kind of a possibility is unfolding here out of this. All these different, we have like a multi-dimensional scene going on. We have the radish, we have the vegan, and we have this. And I'm guessing, and we have the spontaneous ones that come up here and there, and then there's the phone calls. So it's becoming multifaceted very quickly. But when I say open present moment, I'm looking at what kind of an intelligence do we need to connect into now as the four directions to stabilize. Yes.
I'm sorry. Could I just say one thing, because it just keeps coming to me? And
sure, always, sure.
Thank you. It's just tying back to what you were saying with Jamin. I think it's really important to not forget joy and playfulness, because the work that we're all embarked on can get very heavy, or we can also have this ego attachment to success or whatever, or thinking we know right answers or whatever. But when we get back into playfulness and brings us back into creativity, and then we let go of those reins of controlling,
Hmm.
and that's why I really like what Nolan was saying about not wanting to make too much noise.
Yeah.
Because for me, what that picture comes to me is that just holding space to allow the process of creation to come into action
Hmm.
through us. It's not my will, but thy will through me. How's it? Through
Yeah.
me, thy will be done.
My will is thy will be done.
Yeah. And I just wanted to mention that because that came up for me really strongly.
Yep.
To offer that to Jamin
Hmm.
and all of us.
Okay. And I think that was perfect timing because I was in opening the present moment. I was going to invoke in the siddhas now, and it always gets kind of light and playful when we do that because we're coming to the end now, and we're getting close to the end. We're going a little over, but 15 minutes more or whatever. But I'm going to do an invocation. So just if everybody could just be open, because I'm going to open space to the higher and ask for help from above in opening the present moment through the universal life force, wisdom, energy of the Holy Spirit, for the manifestation, experience, and perception in divisible appearance in this very moment, here and now, of the centering essence transmission of accelerated collective evolution, of the pure potential of this moment, here and now, of these four players in this space that represent the four directions, each a pole, an axis for the gathering of forces to be brought into this equation as a formula for the creation of possibilities entering into our lives that bring us all together for an adventure beyond any of our imaginings, engaging our totality of each one of us with the greatest gifts we have to offer, being guided by the siddhas of our divine overself, in facing the shadows we will encounter, in bringing to fruition this sacred space that we are creating right now, here with all of us. So be it. And as we slowly release the intensity of consciousness needed to hold such a space together, we can allow whatever insights come as we just relax. Sometimes you just got to let stuff come in from beyond and see where it takes you. And to be honest, that's probably some of the, if not the funnest stuff to do. It's so fun to do that. And it's indescribable and unteachable, and it's a knack, and you just get it. One day you just get it. That's the fun part of it. It's like a kid chasing butterflies, really. I mean, it's total rapt delight. But I think everybody did hear all that and did get that. So
Was awesome.
yeah.
I had my hands open like this, and there was a gift brought to me for all of us, and I didn't know what it was at first, and it didn't have any weight or anything, but it was being made and created in my hands. And
Oh, right.
once you finished, I looked at it not with these eyes, but and it went up and up and up and up and up, and it was cool, but it was warm, and it was blue, but it wasn't not blue. It was clear and it was golden, and it was a giant crystal that had no weight and had color but no color.
Hmm.
It was crystal clear.
Yep, it's always the women who bring it in, who are the creator, the one that creates it. Yep, that's how. Yep. Well, cool. So, yep, cool. I like that. Nothing needs to be said about that. I'm glad you shared what it was. Cool. That's kind of a check. First check. What did you think of that, Nolan? You look like a little kid looking at a really cool movie or something. I just like your look, so I'm like, tell me, what's that kind of thing?
Well, I've had experiences like the one I just had pretty frequently the past few months, where I kind of get this wave or like wash that goes over my whole body, and it's like fuzzy and kind of like goosebumps, you know, but it'll be like over a fairly extended period of time. And I've never been I've always what it feels like to me is if I was trying to surf, and basically I like get up on the wave and I'm like, oh, and I just end up falling off, you know. I'm not really sure what to do because it gets a little bit overwhelming or something. I don't know, but it's I don't know. It's not like scary overwhelming. It's just like, usually what happens is basically I tell myself, I'm like, don't fuck it up. and then it kind of dissipates.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, that just takes practice. You're going to become a master surfer. Because I'm definitely a master surfer.
Awesome.
More like, yeah, totally. More like a master space cruiser, but surfer works too. It's pretty much the same feeling, whether it's space or surf. Either way, it works. Okay, my heart is full and happy. How about everybody else? That's what we're about. That's where we end. That was a great one, Melissa. That's where we end. Full and happy. Okay, if anybody else has anything they'd like to share before I end the meeting. we should have pictures of that. Just keep practicing and we'll get pictures. Oh wait, we're being videotaped. Never mind. So I'm pretty sure last time I screwed up when I stopped the recording, I saved it to my computer, which I will not do this time. I'm just going to close it because when I did that before, Ray could just upload it and share it. Otherwise, I had to download it and pass it to Ray, and it was a real hassle. But this time I'll just stop and close it when we're done. I'm just saying that
before
out
you
loud.
go.
Yes.
Where could I access this recording afterwards? Because I want to get, I would love to get the ones that people are cool with putting up on Radish.
Well, the last meeting, not this one. This one I'd really like to go a lot of places because I revealed the whole sequence, but not revealed. It wasn't a secret. I mean, but I shared it. This I'm not sure because I wasn't going to save it to my computer this time because it's a lot of steps to get it to Ray so he can share it on the Vegan World 2026 Facebook and all those other places. So you'll have to ask Ray.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Yeah, because
Okay.
I believe it's available in the cloud version of whatever this is, and that's how it works, but I'm not 100% sure. But I'm not going to touch this next one because I like what Ray does with it. Once he gets it out there, then I'll do whatever. It seems to get to the right channels that way. Yeah, that's what I would do. Anyway, as far as the meeting goes, I'm going to stop the recording now.